Doodly 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 doo intro jingle. Hey guys, Brian the Pirate here. So, in the last video, it was regarding the September quarterly update, and obviously there was a lot of information that we covered and had to fit into one video, which meant I didn't really go into too much detail about anything specific. So that's what I would like to do in today's video. If you want to see the video regarding the quarterly update and some of my general thoughts, by the way, that can be found here, I think. I haven't YouTubed in a while, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be a thing here. So click on that, watch that video if you like. Today, though, we're going to be talking about skills and only skills. We might touch on the itemization a little bit, because obviously that has an impact on skills. For the most part, I want to discuss the pros, the cons, and what improvements I think we or I could bring, or like suggestions I can make towards the skill and talent system that would greatly benefit what the current system is looking like, or from what we've been told about the current system. Also, I'm making this video in the hopes that Blizzard see it and they take that feedback. Of course, if you guys want to chime in, do so in the comments below, and we can talk games, because we all like games. So let's go through some of the pros first, some of the improvements that Blizzard have made over the initial system that we saw in the demo. Now, a lot of the criticism that was seen in the demo was the talent trees were talent twigs. Yeah, they were very bare bones. They were very pointless. They were very arbitrary. It was like, you want to pick this, and then you want to pick that, and maybe also get that. And it was basically a case of eventually you just get everything anyway, and it was just click these buttons in a line. There was no real choice. There's no real customization there. And I think that is something that we really need to make a point of, or point across to the developers. We don't want the illusion of choice. We want customization. And that has become such a core mechanic within the hack and slash action RPG genre. All of the main players in the genre have a substantial amount of customization in various aspects of the game, but in this case, in how we do our builds to skills and talent. So in response to this, Blizzard have presented to us this gargantuan tree, which artistically looks absolutely incredible. I think it looks really, really, really cool. But aside from that, it kind of ends there. So we've got substantially more skills and talents, or it would appear we have substantially more skills and talents than what we had before. I believe it's 30 skills. I think I last counted 28, but I would assume it's 30, rounding it up to a realistic number. So we've got 30 skills, which is brilliant. Now, in comparison to Path of Exile, some folks may look at this and go, only 30 skills? That's nothing. In Path of Exile, you've got 200 whatever skills, plus an extra 100 odd for support. Yes, however, in comparison to Path of Exile, Diablo games have classes that are specific archetype. They're all unique. They all have a theme. But the Sorceress, which is the elemental spellcaster. You've got the Barbarian, which is the beef castle that hits people with giant weapons. You've got the Druid, who is the lycanthrope, who transforms into animals and looks after animals and whatnot. Everything is very, very thematic. Whereas in Path of Exile, the classes, they don't really force you into any kind of theme. You could pick the Shadow and still be a spellcaster and not be some stealthy rogue assassin. You could pick I forgot what we call him, the really old guy with the big stick. You could pick him and still be an archer of some sort. It's the only impact in Path of Exile is where you start in the passive tree. And then of course you've got the ascendancies, which have somewhat of an impact, but again, there's no real archetype, there's no real theme there, or at least you're not forced into one. So going back to Blizzard, you've got these 30 skills that are all thematic to that class, and if you pick another class, you've got another 30 skills thematic to that class. So when you actually add up the classes, which I assume there's going to be 5, and they all have 30 each, that's substantially more than just 30 skills. You've still got your variety across the classes. Now, the idea is that you look at it and go, well, I want to be a spellcaster, so I'm going to go spellcaster class. Whereas in Path of Exile, you go, well, I can be anything I want. And that's why you've got this huge open tree. So comparatively, saying, oh, you've only got 30 skills to the 200 odd in Path of Exile, it doesn't really make sense. It's not apples to apples, it's apples to oranges, as the saying goes. So when it comes to the amount of skills themselves, fantastic. I think 30 is a good number. Potentially, there is room for more. Maybe later down the line in expansions, they could add another 10 skills or whatever. That could change up the builds a little bit. But as a starting point, at the very least for the base game, 30 is a good amount. What's missing, or what I think needs to be vastly improved upon, is the customization for those skills. So from my understanding, and I think it's an odd move, frankly, it looks like you do follow the branches, which is weird because there's, again, no choice. You go, okay, I picked this skill here, you know, there it is, and now I'm going to pick that because it benefits that, and then I'm going to pick this one because it benefits that, and whatever that turns out to be because it benefits that, and so on and so forth. Where is the customization in the skill then? Why? What's the point? Why don't those things just automatically come with it at this point? It's this illusion of I'm clicking on a button, therefore I'm customizing the skill. No, you're going to get these things anyway. It's an arbitrary additional click at this point. And again, comparing to either Path of Exile or, let's say, Last Epoch, we'll use Path of Exile again because that one I think is the most blatant in terms of customization. Let's say we got Meteor from this tree. I'm assuming Meteor is going to be one of the classes since they showed us an example of it. So in Diablo 3 and potentially in Diablo 4, it looks like they've even gone backwards on this, but in Diablo 3, Blizzard had introduced the mechanic of being able to change the skill in some way. So you had an ice meteor, a lightning meteor. You could make lots of little meteors. You could do an even bigger meteor, I believe, if I recall correctly. It's been a while since I played. And all of that. And that was fantastic. You had this customization where you could make it thematic. If you wanted to be all lightning, you could make it a lightning meteor, and it would come with some lightning effects. Like lightning was good for CC, for example, for stuns. If you went with ice, it would help with things like your increased chance to freeze and chill and whatnot. Then games like Path of Exile, Last Epoch, other action RPGs, Vulcan, and a couple of others, they took that further. It was like, okay, this is good. We can change a skill how it feels, how it looks, but let's take that further. So I don't believe there is a meteor in Path of Exile. I've never seen one, but we'll use meteor as a skill. So in Path of Exile, where they took that further, you've got the, let's say in a 6th link, the initial meteor skill, and then you've got 5 further potential things you could do to it, but from a vast array. Again, I mentioned there was over 100 support gems, so you could do spell cascade, which would make it cast more, or you could do something that would make the AoE bigger, or you could do something that made it cast smaller but in a higher frequency, so there was more of it, so it was more of like a meteor rain or meteor shower rather. Then you could add another modifier to it. So let's say you did change it to ice, you changed the element to ice, you then made a modifier that broke it down to make it more of a meteor shower. Less damage, but it covered a larger area. Then you added something that increased the chance to freeze. And then you added another thing that increased the damage to things that were frozen. And suddenly you've changed meteor from one thing, rock that lands to the ground and causes damage in a relatively big area, to this really good crowd control mechanic that covers the entire area, freezes everyone, and then leaves them susceptible to follow-up spells from another skill or talent. But then you could change it further. You go, you know what? I don't want to do that with meteor. I want to make it really, really good for single target. So you got something that increased the damage but reduced the area of effect. And you increased the chance to crit with spells on it. And you would add these things, and you had this vast array to customize just that one skill. That is what's missing from this tree. The only choices we really have at the moment are basically thematic. We can go, okay, I want to be the fire sorceress. No, I want to be the lightning sorceress. No, I want to be the cold sorceress, and so on. Like, yes, you can mix and match, but if we're being realistic here, obviously there's going to be items that affect one specific element. It's very likely that predominantly of your 6 skills that you have, that you're going to focus on one element. So there's 3 builds with slight variations in them at the moment. Obviously that's not really a lot for a hack and slash action RPG in 2020 or in 2025 or whenever Blizzard are going to release Diablo 4. So part of me thinks that this is because of feedback about Diablo 2. Obviously, when Diablo 3 came out, a lot of comparisons were made to Diablo 2. So the devs, Blizzard, have just been bombarded with, make it more like Diablo 2, make it more like Diablo 2, make it more like Diablo 2. And they've gone, okay. And they've gone back to the original talent trees in some way. And I don't think they realize that when they say make it more about Diablo 2, they mean don't have really basic itemization, which is what most people actually want. It's, at least for me, the itemization in Diablo 2 is substantially better than that in Diablo 3, and that's something we want carried on from Diablo 2. And what, again, other action RPGs follow through with, like Path of Example. You know what? That's what it's become at this point. Path of Example. So when it comes to Diablo 3, the skill system was going in an interesting direction, and other developers for other games took that further. And Blizzard, likewise, need to develop on that system, make that better, make an improvement on that. So as we've established, that is with adding more customization to the skill and separating the passives altogether. Obviously, they've added this, the roots, which are supposed to be passives. Without seeing more about that, though, it's kind of hard to really add any feedback without having more information. Like we will give in very basic details, and we have to unlock them through the skill tree, which is, it's a bit weird. Don't do that, Blizzard. Don't. It's peculiar. Again, it makes it feel a little bit arbitrary. It's like, again, there's an illusion of choice. And by the looks of things, to get to the vast majority of the skills we want, we have to get them anyway. So, yeah. I think another thing that is holding Blizzard back is, again, with Diablo 3, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They dumbed a lot of things down. I recall Jay Wilson was saying, oh, we're just getting rid of the illusion of choice, where, people were just going online and copying everything online. Yes, that does happen a lot, by all means. But people also, at least with their first characters, I did it. When I made my first character in Diablo 2, I didn't look it up online because I just wanted to make a character and play the game. It wasn't until I realized that some things could be improved upon, then I looked online and was like, okay, how can I make things better? What have other people done to optimize it? And people do the same in Path of Exile. When they first start playing, they go, oh, okay, let's make a character. They get so far in the game, they go, okay, how can I optimize it? And then they look for advice and go to, third-party areas for knowledge, wikis and whatnot. And giving the players the opportunity to make that mistake is part of the learning experience. It's part of the fun. It's because of those learning experiences that now when I play action RPGs, I take a step back, I look at the talents, what's available to me, and I have a lot of fun in theory crafting. Okay, what can I make? What builds could I develop from these systems through these classes? And I go through the process of sitting back and going, okay, if we stuck to a theme, if we did make an ice-based sorceress, Would I focus on CC? Would I focus on single target damage, on AoE, a mix of all these things? And then I choose what skills I like and what talents and passives best influence that build further. Whereas in Diablo 3, and by the looks of things, the thought process the devs have with Diablo 4 is, let's just make it incredibly easy. Let's make it really simple. So John Smith, Joe Bloggs, whoever can just show up and whack their finger on whatever skills and it will be somewhat viable. And they don't really need too much choice. They just need to have fun. And that works to a certain extent. It's entry level. People get through the door, they're in, they have a good time. A month later, they leave because they had their good time, and then there's nothing to keep them. And I think that's one thing the developers are potentially not really considering when it comes to hack and slash action RPGs. The initial audience who buys the game that made Diablo 3 such a good seller, you know, it sold really, really well. But these people that bought the game, the vast majority of people who bought the game, played maybe one or two classes, and then they said, yep, I've had my fun, on to the next thing. And the core audience then dwindled and got smaller and smaller at a significantly higher pace than a lot of their competitors. And the reason for this is because there was no real in-depth customization. And I think that's another key word to focus on, in-depth. Complexity isn't necessarily better. Path of Example is very complex in a lot of ways, and it is thus overwhelming to a lot of people. But that complexity, the depth of the passive tree and skills allowed the players to keep coming back, taking one build and adapting it in so many different ways. One main skill, more specifically, and adapting that one skill in so many different ways. And Last Epoch's now doing. And I think Last Epoch system has really, really nailed it. And I want to go into further with the Last Epoch system and show the Blizzard devs. Blizzard, if you're watching, what sort of system you want to be aiming for. Not a direct copy and paste, obviously make it Blizzard, but they've really nailed the depth and also the simplicity. Because at the moment, it's too dumb. You won't hold your core audience. You will have your loyalists who will play the game for a while because it's Diablo 4, but no one will stick around. And thus, you won't make as much money. You'll sell millions of copies. I don't doubt that. But you won't sell millions of microtransactions because everyone will have already off to another place by then. Okay, so I want to take you through my first experience when I first made a character on Last Epoch and how that affected me and why I think they've got the passive and skill system absolutely nailed down. We're going to look at the passive system first. So in Last Epoch, you pick a class. At the moment, they've got 5. You've got like your Necromancer, Witchy Lady. You've got your weapons specialist, kind of a paladin character, but you can also spec into two-handed weapons, which is actually what I've done. And then you've got like a druidish character, and then you've got your spellcaster, wizard kind of character, and there's another one I can't remember. It's in development. Now, the way it's done in Last Epoch, as you can see, is you have your base class, which in this case is the Sentinel, and then you've got your masteries thereafter. So you've got Void Knight, Forge Guard, and the Paladin. I went with Void Knight, and when I first started playing the game, I looked at Sentinel, I looked at all the specs, and then I looked at the 3 masteries, which subsequently come with their own specs. Now, at the moment, as you can see here, I'm pretty much all in on Void Knight. You can actually mix and match. You have to pick one mastery, which you then get as mastered, and that then unlocks the entire tree and you get some additional skills. But you can still, if you so wish, access half of the other 2 trees and mix and match your build. So to those of you who have not played Last Epoch, and are definitely more familiar with Diablo. I'll try and replace some of the wordage and verbiage, as it were, with Diablo references. So let's say this is actually the sorceress, and Void Knight, which is like a shadow damage, void damage, is ice, Forge Guard is fire, Paladin is lightning. Now, these are just the passives. No skills are involved here. You earn skills the higher up you get through the passives based on the mastery that you've picked. But otherwise, these are just the passives that benefit the class in some way. These can benefit skills in the same way that if I went with Void Knight, void damage was improved, and obviously being Void Knight, I did predominantly voids based skills, things like that. But otherwise, there's no direct influence of the skills. I think that's very important, that they remain separate, that you improve aspects of your build, but not the skills directly through your passives. So for example, I made this character and I was looking at everything and I was like, what kind of sentinel do I want to be? The build I ended up going for was a very DPS heavy build, very much DPS, almost glass cannon in some ways. I've built in some survivability into the build. It's predominantly from attacking though. I have a lot of life steal, a lot of life leech, and I grant myself buffs by doing damage that improves my survivability. But otherwise, I'm wielding a two-handed weapon and I output a lot of damage. When I looked at this build, that's what I initially thought of. But I also thought, with the Void Knight alone, with this sheet of passives alone, I also thought, oh, I could make a shield-based build as well. And I could also make a caster-based build, because you do have like long-range spells that you can also use with Void Knight. And then I looked at the Forge Guard, and I likewise did something similar. I was like, okay, I can make a very DPS-heavy two-hand or even one-hander build. I can make a very defensive, fire-based shield build. The Paladin, it's holy damage, but again, in comparison, I could do something that's very damage-based. If I was a sorceress, something very CC-based with lightning. I can make something that was very defensive with lightning, you know. And that's just with the passives alone, and with these separate trees. That's 9 builds I've gotten in my head within minutes of loading up the character and just looking at what is available. Then I looked at the skills. So the skills, you've got a vast array to choose from, but of course you can only have 5 main skills that are on your hotbar. When you pick these skills, they have their own tree. So for example, if we go to lunge, you've got this tree here. I think it's 24 abilities altogether. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And they again have a theme. They branch out in a certain array. Again, I went with high damage. So here I went for mana efficiency so I could cast it more often. Here I went for increased damage from initiative, which is a buff that I got, increased crit chance. And then here, when I had initiative, even further crit chance or crit damage. You know, all these things are based around outputting more damage with this lunge ability. Lunge is a dash and a stab, basically. But I could have taken another route. If I'd gone this way, I increased my stun chance, and then I can increase it further. And then I can gain health based on the stuns I do. So again, this is making the CC more making the skill more CC focused, more crowd control focused, and then making that crowd control work better for my build with life regen, with increased stuns, and making that crowd control better. You've got all these options for that one skill, and again, that reinforces I can look at a build, I can look at one theme, one area, and still customize it in so many different ways that even if I had a party of 6 and we all chose Void Knight and we all chose Lunge, we would still have different builds despite the fact that we've chosen the same class, subclass, and same skill. but still have entirely different builds. That is customization. That is important. And the way that the devs of Last Epoch have displayed it has made it very accessible. It's very clear. It's very obvious what happens. You go down this route, you have options, but it's best to stick with that route. One thing they've done is you have to have a certain amount of points to progress onto the next area. I didn't actually have enough points to go from there to there, but thankfully I did go in this way. So to get to this skill, I had to put at least 2 points into this skill just to explain what those dots meant. And likewise, to get this skill, I had to have at least 3 in that. And this is another thing that I think is important. It looks like they may have done it with passives on the passive skill tree, where you can increase the stacks, but it's very likely that you'll need to also increase levels of skills, which takes me on to the next point. Now, this is where we slightly touch on itemization, and this is something that I think had a very large impact on how you could make your builds in Diablo 3, and something that Blizzard really needs to avoid with Diablo 4. It doesn't look like they are, and if anything, they've doubled down on it. Scaling every single spell, skill, whatever you want to call it, depending on your class in the game, off the weapon. Do not do this. Do not do that. It is incredibly limiting, and it feels dumb to the build, and it doesn't make sense in the terms of spellcasters either. The fantasy, to use Blizzard's exact words, it doesn't make sense. In Diablo 3, if I wanted to increase my spells and their effectiveness, I had to get a weapon with more damage. That doesn't make sense. A weapon with more damage shouldn't have an impact on how effective my skills are. Again, this limited the variety in the builds, and everyone ended up just doing whatever they could to increase their weapon damage. Crit chance, crit damage, attack speed, all of the usual things, just to make that weapon damage bigger, because then it would scale skills. Now, for things like the Barbarian, where you're using weapon-based skills in the first place, it makes sense. But for things where it's a spell, where it's magic, where it's coming from the caster, not from the weapon, it doesn't make sense. And they need to look at increasing the levels of skills, perhaps. Maybe not even levels, maybe something I've not thought of. Do not, under any circumstances, please base it off weapon damage, which in the current iteration of the game is attack and defense. Like, again, I see where they're going. They're trying to simplify it. They're trying to make it very accessible. I think Blizzard is underestimating their player base and are making things far simpler than they need to be. And at the end of the day, there will be some folks where you make it as simple as possible and they will struggle to understand it. But those people have access to the internet. When I'm playing a sorceress, I don't have to want to carry giant two-handed weapon because it's got the biggest number on it. I then don't want the weapons to be influenced further because, like in Diablo 3, everyone was using the same spec because they just needed the same build to make their skills better, thus making the itemization becoming about the flavor of the month and making sets become more prevalent, which then focused on specific skills to begin with. And this is the important part when it comes to itemization in how they work with skills. In Diablo 2, in Path of Example, in Last Epoch, in Grim Dawn, in Torchlight, even in Torchlight, which is one of the most entry-level games to the genre, the itemization never really directly affected skills. You would get some items that would increase the level of a specific skill to give it increased damage. Again, that makes sense. But you didn't have, like in Diablo 3, weapons and sets that vastly made one specific skill better, because what you're doing there is you're creating a template for the player to follow in the first place. If I picked Meteor, and then you go, in Diablo 4, we've got hundreds of legendaries. How fantastic. Okay, which ones affect Meteor specifically. This one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Okay, those are the 5 items I'm going to use with Meteor, because they all directly adapt it and impact it in some way. They need in Diablo 4 to make them, I don't want to say generic, but less focused on specific skills. By all means, add things that increase the elemental damage with certain skills. That's probably one of the best ways you can do it. You can take a weapon and you can say increase damage or this effect on fire skills. That way one weapon can be used for multiple builds, whereas you can also look at different weapons that have a similar effect but do it in a different way, but again on multiple builds. Because if you get these weapons that have one effect on one specific skill, everyone's going to use that same weapon, because everyone who's gone, Meteor, oh well, there's this one weapon that affects Meteor, let's all use that weapon. You know, it's this illusion of choice again. It eliminates the actual customization. And that's all I want to say on itemization. We'll talk about it more in another video. Too long didn't listen. Okay, so the short version of this is skills, good. Artwork, good. It is good. It looks fantastic. It's not very accessible though. Colorblind users are going to really struggle with it, and people just with poor eyesight are going to struggle with it as well. So that's something to look into. The passives and skill system, you should separate them and vastly expand them. Skills need their own trees. You don't need to make it huge. Maybe not even 25 skills like in Last Epoch, but more than just 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4. That's still not enough, especially when you're just going to get all of them anyway, because that's the build you're going with. Give the player real, substantial choices, not the illusion of choice. Don't link weapons, Pinky, don't link weapons damage or attack damage to spells. Dumbs them down. It limits what you can actually do in itemization in your build, and just the general theme. It makes no sense that I'm a sorceress carrying around a giant mallet of ouch, as I called it in the last video, when I should be wielding this scepter or wand or something that vastly improves my spell damage, my elemental damage, my affinity to my spell, rather than just scaling directly off this number. If you do that, you will have a core community that will come back again and again and again before you've even released any DLC or any expansions. They will keep coming back and keep going to your shop for cosmetics, which we know you're going to implement because it's the obvious thing to do, and I'm not against it. Some folks will be. Cosmetic microtransactions are 100% okay in my book, as long as you keep them cosmetic. And then that's how you're going to bring in the continuous, consistent income, thus making the game better, because people can, well, because you guys, Blizzard, can sink more money into it. The current way you're going is just, let's make it accessible to everyone ever, and then they'll leave after their initial purchase. You want to keep the community going. I looked last night on Twitch. I'm a Twitch streamer. Twitch.tv/Brian the Pirate, by the way, if you're interested. But I was looking at how many people were watching Diablo 3. It was just over 2,000 last night at about 10 p.m. my time, which is British summertime. There was 27,000 people watching Path of Exile. I think, obviously, I know you can't be like, oh, that's directly indicative of the size of the community, but I think it's a very good indicator of at least interest in the community and in the game. And it's because Diablo 3 is too simple. People lose interest. They don't want to come back. They've played the game, they've done it. I briefly came back for the Necromancer. I played him for maybe 20-30 hours. Then I was like, cool, yeah, I like the Necromancer. Probably my favorite class of all the ones in Diablo 3. And now I'm done and I'm going back. And that was it. I was done. I'd seen the content and there was nothing further to hold my interest. And I think you'll find, Blizzard, that is the case with a lot of your fans. Sure, you've got your die-hard Diablo fans that keep coming back regardless of what you do. And that's cool. You really want your game to be huge, to have this thriving community. And you want to make money, which I'm sure ActiveBliz shareholders is what you want. Then you're gonna have to hold our interest, and these are my suggestions to do that. If anyone else has any other suggestions or any feedback, or if you think I'm just a massive wally, then leave a comment. Follow me on Twitch, all that shenanigans. Until then, I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.
Woo! Social media and things. And I should probably tell you to like, subscribe, or whatever they want. Just do what you want. You do you. I appreciate you. Bye.